Let's begin the talk, the discourse for today's satsang. January 24th, here's what Swamiji has to say. Listen for the unexpressed thoughts and feelings behind what people say. Often their words will only mask their real intentions. A common tendency when speaking is first to test the water, to see if it is warm enough for swimming. As any short statement from any saint carries a lot of layers of wisdom, and they can be interpreted in many ways, and different people, based on their understanding, will interpret it in different legitimate ways. So, here are a few thoughts that come to my mind based on what Swamiji writes here. The first one is very interesting. The first line itself: listen for the unexpressed thought and feelings behind what people say. Often their words will only mask their real intentions. Now, Swamiji made an interesting point. He used to say that words, yes, they facilitate conversation, but many times they are barriers to true conversation. He said true conversation is about feelings and thoughts. On the astral plane and the causal plane, Yogananda ji explained to Swamiji that one doesn't talk with words, one doesn't employ language, but people understand each other's thoughts through some sort of telepathic connection. And so Swamiji often used to say the great saints, when they are inspired to write great scriptures, they receive that inspiration on a thought level, and they often need help from their disciples to transliterate it correctly into words, because words require grammar, they require punctuation, they require the right choice according to dictionary meanings which keep changing as the years go by. And so even Yogananda ji, when he wrote Autobiography of a Yogi, he needed one of his disciples to help him to filter the inspiration and put it into English language. And that's why Swamiji often used to say that editing is one of the most important things that a disciple can do. He was a very conscientious editor, and he always edited his own books because he wanted to make sure that his thoughts were conveyed correctly. But now, as this conversation says, this also means that when words are directed towards us, sometimes there is a mismatch between what the words mean and what the person who is using those words wants to mean. And this can work out positively as well as negatively. Sometimes people who are sly, if you know the greatest scamsters in the world, you will see that they are very convincing people. They know what it takes to win other people's trusts, but what their intentions are is a wholly different ball game. And in those cases it's very difficult to detect, well, is this person really being genuine when he says something, or does he have some ulterior motive? But often it also works out in another way, where people who genuinely mean well, because of their imperfect command of language or imperfect in their excitement or some other emotion comes in, they misexpress themselves. And even though their intentions are good, sometimes people misunderstand them. I'll tell you a fun story. About a year ago, or perhaps a few months ago, I took the sadhaka vows, which are sort of the first step of vows that bind me to Ananda Sangha as an organization. Now, when I did this ceremony, one devotee here in Pune came up to me, and what she wanted to say was, congratulations on sort of becoming an organizational man. I don't know if it was a real compliment or if it was sort of underhanded, but I think it was genuine. She just wanted to tell me, okay, you've taken this next step, so hearty congratulations. But instead, she came to me and very happily said, congratulations on becoming institutionalized. And then she left with that same big smile, and I of course smiled in very very generously also. But to become institutionalized means to get admitted to a mental hospital, from where you can never come out. But in this case, because I knew this person, and I knew that she was a genuine sincere well-wisher, I understood that what she meant was a genuine heartfelt support and congratulations. So these things come up, and as Swami Kriyananda mentions here, we have to learn. If we are to keep our friendships, if we are to develop new friendships, if we are to remain safe from people who might use us for their own objectives, we have to learn how to distill uh, the correct thoughts behind words. So let me read this part again, where Swamiji says, listen for the unexpressed thoughts and feelings behind what people say. Often their words will only mask their real intentions. Now, there is one important thing. Most people, when they read this, that you have to understand what somebody means when he says a certain phrase, will start trying to become like Sherlock Holmes. They'll start analyzing that person. Okay. And people do that. There are these people who are professionals at understanding your intent from the expressions on your face. I remember in the US when Donald Trump became the president, and he had to be invited by Barack Obama for the handover, and those two were not really great friends. And of course, they still sat there cordially, and for their 5 minutes, they talked well about each other. But next day, the headlines were all these experts saying, okay, when Barack Obama was talking, his fingers were, close knit, and the other guy had there was pressure in his lips, and they were not looking at each other. The angle of their shoulders said this, while the eyebrows said that. And Swamiji is not meaning that when he says learn to understand the unexpressed thoughts and feelings behind what people say, because the first word Swamiji says is listen for the unexpressed thoughts and feelings. And that's a whole different ball game. And listening comes not from the ears. When Swamiji uses that word, he almost always used it to listen from the heart. The heart is the receiving station where all the impulses and the tremors of various thoughts can be received. The point between the eyebrow is the transmitting station. We are like a radio. And in our hearts, we can receive not just the words, but the feeling, the vibration of the words. And Swamiji is trying to tell us, learn to listen. If we are very still, especially if we meditate deeply, we learn to tune into that stillness. We can learn to listen what actually people say. And Swamiji said, he often used to say that in women, feeling is more developed. And it works both ways. If a woman is calm, she can be very intuitive. Somebody will come in and have just all the right credentials, or she'll go to a shop where she sees something with all the right properties, but she'll choose something else because her heart says so. Of course, if she is not calm, she can be emotional, while man is more reasoning. He can be too intellectual. He reasons a lot, but does not use the heart. And so many times when somebody wants a heart opinion, you go to a woman who is calm. So anyway, coming back, that now no woman learns how to analyze somebody's expressions, but because the heart quality is developed, they are able to tune into it much more. And Swami Kriyananda is saying to us, develop that quality. And he's saying often people's words mask their real intentions. And so the more we develop our heart, because remember, yoga is also the neutralization of the vrittis of heart. So as you meditate deeply, if you are a Kriya yogi, as you practice deeply, all it does is peels those vrittis away. It stills your heart and uplifts it so that the energy is directed upwards to the point between the eyebrows. As that happens, you will see wherever you go that you can sniff out a friend, and you will see wherever you go that something doesn't seem right, even though all the facts say otherwise, you will be led to the right thing that has to be done. Swamiji once gave an example. He said once he was having this lunch, he was very exhausted because he had done a lot of work. But when he was having his lunch, somebody came to him asking whether they had this printing machine, and it was on rent. But the guy who was renting it was saying, can you buy this, or I need to give it away to somebody else because renting is not an option for me. So this fellow came to Swamiji and said, Swamiji, this printing machine. And Swamiji said, I'm eating right now. Don't disturb me now. I want to enjoy my meal. And then this person said, but Swamiji, the person's on the phone, it's urgent. And Swamiji then decided, I'll give it my full attention. Okay, what's the question? The person, he asked this question, and Swamiji says all he did was became still for a few moments and then said, yes, buy the printing machine. He said he did not think it out, but in his heart, he received the right answer without even knowing the person who was on the phone talking to this other guy. What were his intentions? Were they good or bad? So, with those things, I want to mention one more thing. And this comes back to what is the purpose of this book? Living wisely, living well. All the books Swamiji wrote finally had one purpose: to get us to get rid of our egos and to become completely free. And so each of this conversation, when we read to it, it's not enough to just understand what that conversation means, but try to map it onto how do I extract that meaning from this conversation that will also liberate me. And the answer, the reason I'm saying this is, sometimes when we learn to listen for unexpected thoughts and feelings, and we realize that sometimes word only mask people's intentions, quite immediately we start judging them also. And when we judge, what happens is our spiritual journey starts going in the reverse gear. And so all these things that we do, a very good guideline to do this is to enact this role just as God would. Because Master often said that God watches the heart, just as this conversation says. And that's why Yogananda ji used to say that when you pray, mean it from the heart. Even if you are the greatest sinner, when you pray deeply, mean it from the heart, because that is what God watches. And if you are sincere, gradually He will reach you and start pulling you towards Him. But lip prayer, prayer with ulterior motives, meditation with ulterior motives, even though the techniques are done just right, they don't reach God in that same way, and perhaps they don't reach Him at all. And so, watch the heart. God watches the heart. But here's the point I want to make: He knows each and every person because He can read their heart. No matter the sentences used, no matter the outer garb, no matter the financial position or the job profile, He knows each person's heart, but He never judges them, you know. He lets them play their drama. Wherever possible, He supports them. When a person is unreceptive, God waits, saying, you are not receptive right now, I will wait. And so use this ability to listen to unexpressed thoughts in that same way, not to judge people, but you need to know whether somebody means well or not, just because you need to be safe. You need to be able to tell if a person is a friend or not. You need to make wise decisions and use this ability just for that. But don't judge, don't become judgmental. Keep your hand in the pocket. Don't do a business deal with somebody who's not of the good heart. But wherever you can support people, support them despite their follies. Become kinder when you see that somebody is not behaving right, but his heart is true. Then, well, do your best to help them to whatever extent possible. These are the true teachings. It's not just about how many hours we meditate, but the heart has to become softer and softer and softer and softer until finally God enters it. And Yogananda ji was such a good example. Swamiji tells the story of one of the monks, Abbey George, and Swamiji says he was so unmannerly just because he didn't have the right upbringing. When Yogananda ji was sitting there, he would keep his feet on the table, facing the Guru with his shoes on, and he would sit there and laugh and guffaw, and he would tell dirty jokes. And Swamiji said, but Yogananda ji saw his heart was so pure that he would laugh at those jokes. Now, if anybody else had said those, he would have thrown them out. But Yogananda ji, how often? Swami Kriyananda, how often? He looked at people's heart, and if they were good, he allowed them innumerable chances. Of course, he didn't jeopardize the whole work. He knew how to have that balance. But he was there for people. And if you are, as I am, disciples of Paramahansa Yogananda ji and of Swami ji, we have to remember those two guiding principles behind anything we do, even learning to listen to people's uh, thoughts behind their words. As Yogananda ji said, love is what will replace him after he is gone. And as Swamiji said, the only thing that will replace him, if at all, is kindness. So, when you employ these skills, when you try to feel somebody's heart, your heart has to be pure first. If your telescope is muddy, you can't look at any other body, astral body outside, celestial body outside, and get a clear picture. And so, the first quality which Swamiji doesn't mention here is before we can learn in the right way so that it liberates us spiritually, before we can learn how to analyze somebody's unsaid thoughts, our heart has to be pure. Then, from that pure heart, we are able to touch the heart with the right attitude of the other person. And then we are able to see the unsaid thought. And most people have this one unsaid thought, which Yogananda ji wrote to Rajarshi Janakananda. He said, whenever you see a being who's not enlightened, realize that God is crying for deliverance in that body. He's crying to be recognized. And so, if we can train ourselves that whenever somebody makes a mistake and you look at them, the first thing you sense is, here's a soul. Unfortunately, under the sway of Maya, it's been trapped in bondages and it's crying for liberation. And then do your best to help him get free. Sometimes that might mean just walking away because you can't do anything productive. But keep your heart open, be a friend to all, and then, as Swamiji mentions here, listen for the unexpressed thoughts and feelings behind what people say. Often their words will only mask the real intentions. A common tendency when speaking is first to test the water, to see if it's warm enough for swimming. This last line is very apt, especially when you think of giving somebody advice. First, test the water to see if it's warm enough. Advice is very rarely appreciated, and most people give advice when it's not asked. These two combine to make a very toxic, volatile mixture. So before you give advice, well, try to see if the person is willing to listen. Try to see if in your heart you feel he's your friend. And then, if all of this seems true, if you think the person is receptive, if you think what you say will help him, and if you think you are going to say it kindly as his friend, then give that advice. These things are a learning of a lifetime. And that's why I hope all of you who are viewing this take up this path as a journey of this one lifetime. Joy to you.